He never saw it coming. None of them did. The bar was loud in the way places get when people try to drown their own exhaustion, voices stacked on voices, the smell of spilled beer mixing with cheap wood polish, and a cold wind slipping through the doorway every time someone entered. But beneath all that noise, there was a quiet tension coiled around one woman sitting alone at the far end of the counter. She didn't stand out at first glance. A gray hoodie, sleeves pushed up, hair tied with the careless precision of someone who didn't need to impress anyone. Her hands were wrapped around a glass she wasn't drinking from. She looked like any other traveler passing through, except for the stillness, the kind that suggested she was listening to everything and needing to react to nothing. The Marines noticed her anyway. A group of them pushed through the crowd, their boots heavy against the floorboards. They carried the energy of men who believed the room belonged to them, shoulders squared, laughter sharpened by arrogance. One of them, broader than the rest and already flushed from drinking before he arrived, spotted the empty stool beside her. He didn't ask. Description below, he didn't pause. He simply shoved her shoulder with the back of his hand, as if brushing away an inconvenience. "Move," he muttered, not seeing her eyes, not seeing the quiet storm sitting behind them. The shove wasn't hard enough to hurt her, at least not in a physical sense. But the room noticed. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. A few heads turned. The bartender froze in the middle of wiping a glass, the cloth twisting in his fingers. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she blinked once, slowly, as though she was deciding whether the moment deserved her attention. She placed her glass down without drinking it, letting the faint clink settle into the sudden hush around her. Across the bar, someone whispered, he shouldn't have done that, but the Marine didn't notice the change in atmosphere. He took the seat he believed he had earned through birthright and ego, stretching his arms with a grin that never reached his eyes. His friends crowded around him, slapping his back, laughing a little too loudly, pretending not to care about the tension pressing into their skin. The woman finally turned her head. Her expression was unreadable, not angry, not startled, not even offended. What she felt was more complex, something layered beneath years of command, restraint, and a life built on discipline, so deep it touched her bones. She studied him the way a surgeon studies a patient before an incision, precise, emotionless, exact. And it was in that gaze, cold and steady, that the first cracks of unease formed in the Marine's confidence. Something about her silence made him feel smaller than he had intended. He tried to reclaim the moment by laughing again, louder this time, but his voice stumbled at the edges. The bartender cleared his throat softly, as though trying to warn him without speaking. Even the air seemed to shift, pulled tight by something unseen. No one here knew her, but everyone here felt her. A Marine at the far end of the room leaned closer to his buddy. "She looks familiar." His friend shook his head quickly, dismissing the thought. "Doesn't matter. She's just some girl. Just some girl." The words echoed in her mind not because they offended her, but because she had heard them before, in deserts and war rooms, from men who learned much too late that, uniform or not, she did not belong in the category of just anything. Her fingers tapped once on the wooden counter, a small, almost imperceptible motion. But to those watching, and by now the whole bar was watching, it was a signal of something beginning. In the stillness between breaths, a sense of inevitability settled into the room, delicate as glass yet heavy as steel. The Marine had no idea who she was, but he was about to find out. The Marine shifted in his stolen seat, suddenly aware of how quiet the bar had become. It wasn't silence, not exactly, more like the collective inhale of a room waiting for something to happen. He glanced sideways at her, expecting anger, a protest, or even fear. Instead, she looked almost peaceful, the calm before a storm that had chosen its target long before it made landfall. He smirked to reassure himself. "You got a problem." She didn't answer. Her eyes drifted back to the untouched drink, then to the door behind him. as if deciding how long she wished to stay in this moment before tearing it apart. Her silence bothered him more than any insult could have. Men like him knew how to fight noise with louder noise. But silence made him feel examined and judged. His friends sensed it too. One nudged him under the counter. "Let it go, man." But pride rarely listens to wisdom. He leaned closer to her, breath thick with alcohol. I said he didn't get to finish. She lifted her hand effortless, unhurried, and placed 2 fingers lightly against his wrist. Not in aggression, not in warning, simply to stop him mid-motion. But something about that soft, precise touch triggered a primitive instinct in him, like a predator recognizing a larger shadow passing overhead. His breath hitched, his pulse skipped, his brain whispered a warning he couldn't articulate. Her voice finally entered the space between them, quiet, steady, and carrying the authority of someone who had stood in war zones where he would have begged to be evacuated. "You should move your arm," she said, nothing more. The words brushed the air like a cold wind through broken windows, calm yet sharp enough to cut. The Marine's friends exchanged glances. This wasn't the tone of a frightened woman. This wasn't even the tone of an equal. This was someone speaking from a higher plane, someone accustomed to obedience as naturally as breath. A young corporal 2 stools away straightened unconsciously, his body reacting before his mind even processed why. The Marine tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. Or what? She didn't answer, her gaze lowered to his wrist beneath her fingers. And in that still, suffocating moment, he sensed the vastness behind her calm, the discipline, the training, the years of command. It wasn't that she could hurt him. It was that she could end him before he understood what had happened. He jerked his arm away, too fast, too defensive, the reaction of a man who had accidentally stepped on a landmine. She let her hand fall back to her side, unbothered. The bar exhaled collectively, but humiliation has a way of twisting inside the chest, reshaping fear into anger. His pride clawed at the edges of his restraint, and in desperation, he slammed his palm against the counter, trying to reclaim the authority he'd never actually had. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" he demanded, voice louder than necessary, masking insecurity with volume. A few Marines at the tables stiffened uncomfortably. They'd seen this pattern before. A man too arrogant to back down, too insecure to walk away. At the far corner, a retired Navy chief recognized something in her posture and felt the hairs on his arms rise. "No way," he whispered to himself. "It can't be her." She finally looked at the Marine again, and this time her stare carried weight. An appraisal from someone who had reviewed mission files thicker than his entire career. "Yes," she said softly, "I know exactly who you are." He swallowed hard, throat suddenly dry. "But the better question," she continued, "is whether you have any idea who I am." Her words didn't provoke laughter or outrage. They settled into the room like a dropped match on dry brushes, small, silent, inevitable. The Marine opened his mouth to speak, but a tremor of doubt crossed his face. She didn't look like a private citizen. She didn't look like someone stumbling into unwanted trouble. She looked like someone used to commanding hundreds. Someone who could end careers with a single signature. Someone who had survived battles he would never dare speak of. His friends backed away, as if distance alone might save them from whatever truth was about to break open. The woman rose from her stool, not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough for every trained eye in the room to snap toward her. Her presence expanded, quiet yet unmistakable, like a tide rising without warning. Somewhere deep inside him, the Marine understood something life, changing. He had made a mistake no amount of rank could shield him from. But the truth of who she was had not yet been spoken. And when it revealed itself, it would shake the room. When she stood, the room seemed to tilt, not physically but perceptually, like every eye tried to adjust itself to a truth it had been ignoring. Her hood fell slightly back, revealing the sharpness of her gaze, the quiet steadiness etched into her face. It wasn't beauty that drew attention, it was authority carved into the calm lines around her eyes, softened only by the restraint of someone who knew the weight of every decision she'd ever made. The Marine straightened reflexively, though he didn't know why. Some habits of military conditioning ran deeper than arrogance. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Her words flowed with the measured clarity of someone who had briefed commanders in war rooms where a misplaced breath could shift the fate of entire missions. "You threw your weight at a stranger," she said, "and you thought your uniform would excuse it." She paused, letting the tension settle, letting him feel the gravity of the space widening between them. But uniforms don't cover character, they reveal it. His jaw tightened. She watched every expression, every flicker of emotion, shame, defiance, fear, passing like clouds over a sun incapable of hiding. A murmur rippled through the room. A few Marines at the back exchanged uneasy glances, their posture shifting from casual to alert. They still didn't know who she was, but they felt in their gut that they were witnessing something unequal, something like a junior soldier challenging the person who signed his deployment orders. The retired Navy chief at the corner leaned forward. Recognition hit him like a drop of ice sliding down the spine. He had seen her once years ago, surrounded by medals she refused to wear and officers twice her age who stepped aside when she walked in. His voice trembled as he whispered, "That's Commander Hale." One Marine nearby heard him and froze. Then another and another. Awareness spread like a quiet, unavoidable shockwave, each realization tightening the air. Captain Mara Hale, the youngest woman to command the Navy SEAL's most classified operational unit. A legend wrapped in silence. A ghost in military corridors, a name spoken in the kind of reverence that didn't require rank to enforce respect. And she was standing in this bar, wearing a hoodie, after being shoved by a man who didn't know he had just struck a superior, whose authority stretched across entire oceans. The Marine who shoved her hadn't heard the whispers yet. He only saw the shift in the crowd and misread it as support. "You think you're smarter than me?" he asked, trying and failing. To regain ground, she looked at him with a calm that felt surgical. "No," she said softly, "I think you're reckless. I think you mistake force for strength, and I think you've forgotten what it means to serve." Her words didn't scold, they dissected. The room fell utterly still. Then the retired chief finally found his voice. "Sir," his tone cracked mid-sentence. "Commander Hale." Every Marine within earshot stiffened as if struck by an electric current. Heads whipped toward her. Some stood up so fast their chairs scraped the floor. Others swallowed hard, the reality slicing through the haze of alcohol. The Marine who shoved her blinked, confused. "Commander?" He let out a shaky laugh. "She's not." But then he saw the look in the chief's eyes, and the way every Marine around him shifted into rigid respect, and the way his own friends stepped back from him, creating a physical buffer between him and the woman whose name carried the weight of unspoken operations. Disbelief washed over him, his breath faltered. "No," he whispered, "she can't be." Commander Hale took one step toward him, not threatening, not aggressive, simply closing the distance he had opened through ignorance. She lowered her voice, letting her words settle directly into his fear. "You don't know me," she said. "But your commanding officers do, and trust me." She paused, letting the silence sharpen around them. "This moment will reach them long before you do." He blanched, color draining from his face. Regret hit him like a wave. Too late, too heavy. But she wasn't done, not with anger, not with vengeance, with something far more dangerous, truth. "You wear the uniform," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. "But tonight you forgot the responsibility that comes with it." The room held its breath again. Her words were not punishment. They were judgment, and the worst part was she was right. The Marine stood frozen, as though the floor had turned to ice beneath him. His bravado, once loud and careless, now collapsed inward, leaving only the exposed truth of a man whose uniform held more discipline than he did. His pulse hammered in his throat, the weight of the moment pressed into his chest, making every breath feel earned rather than given. Commander Hale watched him with a quiet sorrow, not for him specifically, but for what he represented. A fracture in the code she had dedicated her life to, a reminder that not every person who wore the uniform understood the responsibility it demanded. Her gaze softened just slightly, the way a storm softens before the rain begins. "Do you know what the uniform means?" she asked, her voice so low it drew the entire room closer without anyone stepping forward. "It means walking into rooms with respect first. It means remembering the oath you swore even when no one is watching. It means protecting dignity, yours and others." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet, deliberate tone held more power than any reprimand shouted across a parade deck. Every Marine in the bar found themselves standing straighter. Even those who had done nothing wrong felt the echo of her words ripple through their bones. The man who'd shoved her swallowed hard, his lips parted, but nothing coherent came out. He wanted to apologize, but apologies felt too small beneath the enormity of his mistake. He wanted to defend himself, but excuses crumbled before they reached his tongue. She held up a hand gently, not to silence him, but to save him from further humiliation. "This isn't about punishment," she said. "It's about accountability." The distinction sank deep. It carried weight, but not cruelty. For the first time since the confrontation began, he lowered his head, not in shame, but in understanding. A small gesture, but one that felt like the beginning of something he hadn't known he needed until this moment. The retired Navy chief stepped forward, his voice quiet, reverent. "Commander, if you'd like us to escort him out." She shook her head. "He's not dangerous, just lost." Her words landed heavily, not as insult but as truth. The Marine's shoulders trembled, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a heavy realization that he'd been walking through his military life with more pride than purpose. Commander Hale picked up her untouched drink, studying the reflections in the glass. The amber liquid rippled softly, mirroring the tension still lingering in the room. She placed the glass back down without drinking. "You have potential," she said, turning her eyes back to him. "But potential without discipline becomes chaos, and chaos gets people hurt." He finally managed a whisper. "I didn't know who you were. That's the point," she replied. "You shouldn't need to know someone's rank to treat them with respect." The simplicity of the sentence hit him harder than her identity ever could. His throat tightened, his voice shook. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." The apology was small, quiet, and real. It didn't fix everything, but it was a beginning. Her expression shifted, still stern, but no longer cold. "Learn from this," she said, "and carry it forward. That's what makes a Marine worth following." His chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. He nodded slowly, sincerely. It wasn't redemption, it was direction. Around them, the bar released its breath like a tide finally retreating. Conversations didn't resume immediately. Everyone needed a moment to file the memory away, to absorb what they had witnessed. Power without ego, authority without cruelty, and a lesson delivered with precision instead of punishment. Commander Hale adjusted her hoodie, pulling it back over her hair. The fabric brushed her cheek as she tucked a loose strand behind her ear. She looked almost ordinary again, almost, but the room had seen the truth now, and ordinary was not a word that would ever fit her. She stepped back from the counter. "Take care of each other," she said, not to the Marine who shoved her, but to all of them. A simple order, a timeless one. As she walked toward the door, the Marines parted instinctively, creating a clear path without being asked. They stood straighter, their gazes respectful, their silence filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of the woman before them. When she reached the doorway, a young Marine barely out of training called out softly, "Commander, thank you." She paused. A faint, Almost invisible smile touched the corner of her lips. "Serve well," she replied. Then she stepped into the night, where the cold wind wrapped around her like an old companion. The door closed behind her with a gentle thud, leaving the room suspended in a rare, reflective stillness. The Marine she had confronted sat down slowly, his hands shaking as reality settled deep into him. His friends placed quiet hands on his shoulders, not in pity, but in solidarity. He didn't need punishment, he had already been changed. Outside, Commander Hale walked into the darkness with the confidence of someone who had led men through worse nights than this, carrying the calm certainty that she had done what she always did: restore order, uphold dignity, and leave people better than she found them. And inside the bar, the Marines who witnessed her that night carried her lesson like a compass they hadn't known they'd lost. Respect isn't earned by power. Power is earned by respect.